Hello everybody, this is AK, I'm back. So we have a few things to talk about in this video today. On screen you see a screenshot of the thumbnail of a podcast I did with the fifth person very recently. It is a sequel to the podcast we did last month. Okay, and you see in the thumbnail it says the yield is like 25%. That's how I got so rich. Oh my goodness, I have to be more careful with what I say in these podcasts I do with the fifth person in future if I ever do them again, because they are very good at picking the best, most eye-catching quotation from AK for their thumbnails, right? Kind of scary. Okay. Right, so if you haven't watched that video yet, you might want to go and watch it. It's a lot of fun and laughter. I also published a blog post in response to that video, right? More about that later. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is about investing in Chinese banks now. Right, I know many people are interested in investing in Chinese banks. I've had quite a number of comments from readers in my blog before and now also in my YouTube channel, and whether they make good investments because they are very cheap, right? From a price to book standpoint, Chinese banks look very cheap, and they also seem to have very good dividend yields. I mean, it's paid in renminbi and you have to convert to Sing dollars, but from a dividend yield standpoint, they look pretty attractive. And but of course, when you ask such questions to AK, you know the response, because AK would never invest outside of the Singapore Stock Exchange, because I'm just too lazy to look elsewhere, especially when we have perfectly good options in Singapore, DBS, OCBC and UOB. So I don't see any reason why I have to look elsewhere. I don't have that much money that I don't know where I should park the money. I've said this a few times before. But for those of us who are interested in investing in Chinese banks, it is no secret that the Chinese real estate sector has collapsed, right? And we see in the news all the time, and also stories from people, the locals, who some of them are so desperate at trying to sell their properties at half price and they can't even find buyers, right? That's how bad the situation is for China, and they are struggling with huge problems, which today I saw in the news. It includes cracks in a pillar of China's debt market known as local government financing vehicles, or LGFVs. Right, so that's another problem, and I think if we want to invest in Chinese banks, we want to take note of this, because it's a huge problem. These vehicles were created to fund infrastructure such as roads, airports, power infrastructure, and which rarely generate enough returns to cover their obligations. So they mostly rely on the government, right, municipal funds to stay solvent. And many of these local authorities now are facing cash flow problems due to the country's real estate crisis that all of us know about. And there are growing concerns about this debt market, which is to the tune of $9 trillion US. $9 trillion US. So it is a very mind-boggling sum of money, right? And you have to wonder what kind of domino effects this will have, right? Because $9 trillion, to put this in perspective, is equivalent to more than half of China's annual economic output. More than half of their country's annual economic output. And all types of financial institutions have exposure to this debt. Commercial banks, insurers, mutual funds, securities companies, and hedge funds. And this has to be relevant to anyone who is thinking of investing in Chinese banks, and why so many foreign investors are staying clear of the Chinese banks and not touching them even with a 5-foot pole, because it's just too risky, right? And they probably know something, right? Especially those who are very wealthy and well informed, all right? The collapse in the real estate market, the major property slump in the country, is probably the biggest blow to the local governments, because they get a lot of income from land sales to builders, and that's gone. That's totally gone. So I'm not saying that we cannot invest in the Chinese banks, because it could well turn out to be an opportunity of a lifetime, right? If they survive this and then they continue to thrive, right? You have to take, it's a bit chancy, a bit dicey in my mind, right? So I would remind myself about the pyramid again that I share in my blog, right? You can think of this as an investment for income, possibly, but I think there's a bit of a speculative element as well, because there are too many things that we don't know, right? And the things that we already know are quite frightening, right? Quite scary. Okay, so enough of that. Let's move on to the next topic on screen, which is how to get $200,000 in dividends yearly. And it is simpler than you think, right? Of course, this is the title of my blog post I published this morning in response to the recent video I did with the fifth person, which is of course part 2, right? The first video was done last month. I watched it and I thought it'd be good to tie up a few loose ends. That's why I decided to publish a blog post. But I know not everybody will read my blog posts, especially that's what people tell me lah. Younger people prefer YouTube videos to reading blogs. And if my experience is anything to go by, because YouTube sends me statistics. When I first started this YouTube channel, I didn't have many younger viewers, right? Most of my viewers were 35 years old to 55 years old. They form the bulk of my viewership. But now, ever since I started voicing my own video, I see the number of younger viewers have gone up. So the viewers aged 25 to 35, they now form about 10% of my viewership, my videos viewership, right? So maybe it's true. So for those of you who do not read my blogs or don't like reading blogs in general, this is in a nutshell what I said, right, in response to the latest podcast with the fifth person. The first one was my response to a viewer who said most regular folks would have to speculate in order to generate sufficient capital to get a $200,000 dividend annually from investments. And I said there is no need to speculate, although we could certainly do it, right? And in the podcast with the fifth person, I shared my views on this, the pros and the cons. I say but now I'll tell you there are also other ways to make more money, and regular readers know I did some trading in the past, trading stocks, and I also had side hustles to make more money. I was holding 3 jobs, working 7 days a week at one time. And I also blog about how we should not wait until we have a larger amount of money before we start investing for income. Right, dividends made in the early years, no matter how small, would grow our wealth, and these dividends could be used to invest for even more income if we don't spend the money. Right, so that's number 1. Number 2, in the blog post I say how it's possible to make $200,000 dividends annually without having a large sum of money, right? Because so many people say, oh la, AK must have had millions of dollars to begin with, that's why he can get $200,000 in dividends per year. That's simply not the case. It's not true, right? So in the podcast I said that my capital wasn't $10 million, $5 million, $4 million, and it wasn't even $3 million, right? And it's a much smaller sum of money, right? And I'm now getting $200,000 in dividends yearly if nothing goes wrong. I mean, that's what I got last year. It was a bit more than $200,000. It was like $206,000 last year. And the answer when I say is simpler than you think. It's really simpler than you think, because a lot of what I bought was bought during crisis, where Mr. Market was suffering from severe depression, right? So by now, my experience with AIMS APAC REIT should be quite well known. I mean, I share in my blog or often enough, but now of course it's on YouTube as well. And my investment in AIMS APAC REIT is one of my largest investments, and probably my oldest one. It generates a distribution yield of more than 10% on cost for me year after year. Right? As I got into it in a big way during the global financial crisis. So it is a major contributor to my yearly passive income. And my investment has been free of cost for many years. All right? And I've recovered my capital. And I'm still receiving income from my investment in AIMS APAC REIT. So of the $200,000 in dividends received last year, a big chunk of that money was actually free money, because I've already recovered the cost. I got back my capital years ago. Right? It is money generated from nothing. Essentially, now it's money generated from nothing for many years already, and it will probably continue for many years to come. So how did this happen? Time happened. Time happened. It is possible to get higher dividend yields during crisis if we invest in the right businesses that would survive the crisis. We could also choose to sell these investments later on if their stock prices should recover. And in the podcast I did with the fifth person recently, I used examples of Lipo Mall Trust and F.I.R.E. REIT. But of course, regular readers of my blog would also know that there were others like Sizen REIT, Creases Retail Trust, and Accordia Golf Trust. Right? So all these were sold for significant capital gains, and that grew my wealth. That gave me more capital to invest with. Right? So the capital was smaller, I sold, and that increased the size of my capital. And we could also choose to sell a portion of our investments, like what I did with Old Chang Kee and Hock Lian Seng. I sold half of my investments in them when their share prices doubled. Right? So basically, I got back my capital and I'm still invested. A small investment, but I'm still invested. But whatever I'm holding now is free of cost, and they're still paying me year after year. More free money, which I can use to invest with if I don't spend them. Right? So all this brings me back to the point about speculation. Why is there a need to speculate in order to grow wealth? There's simply no need. In my mind, there's simply no need. So when I say it's simpler than you think, simply wait for the next opportunity to make significant investments for income, like what I did during the global financial crisis. Invest in good businesses which are able and willing to pay us. And that opportunity came not too long ago in the form of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, regular readers know that I emptied my war chest during the pandemic and got into UOB at $19 a share. And that investment in UOB is one of my largest investments today. And it is rewarding me with a dividend yield of almost 9% per annum now. 9% per annum. I also talk about how I started buying into DBS at $13 and $14 a share back in 2016. Now you think at $13 a share, the dividend yield on cost is almost 15% per annum today. All this high yields, coupled with free money I get from AIMS APAC REIT, Old Chang Kee, Hock Lian Seng, for example. Now do you see why I say that the capital that I deployed isn't as much as what some people say it is? It's not. The capital I started with was small, much smaller than what some people would think, right? But it grew. It grew over time with the effort I made to reallocate resources when necessary, and investing during crisis for higher yields, holding on to those good investments in some cases, collecting the dividends, and reinvesting them. So it takes time, right? What I have done over the years isn't simply putting some of my monthly salary in fixed income instruments or in some index. If that was my method, then yes, to generate $200,000 yearly in dividends now, I would need around $4 million in capital today. And this, I agree, would be insurmountable for most regular people. So I remind myself constantly, and that's what I do in my blog. I talk to myself and people eavesdrop on me. I remind myself of what I did over the years and how I made what seemed impossible happen. What seemed impossible is actually possible. Okay? Let this sink in for a while. Right? Don't let people tell us what AK has achieved is not possible for regular people because the capital required must be enormous. No, it's simply not true. That's not my story. That's not my experience. And I'm sharing my story and experience to tell you, okay, to remind myself that it is not true. Okay? Go share this with people you care about and tell them this. I'll leave a link to my blog post so you can go and read at your own leisure. Right? AK is a regular person too. If AK can do it, so can you. Okay? So that about does it for this video. Till the next video, take care of yourself. If AK can do it, so can you. Please like this video. Bye-bye.